let's get going. Looks like we got a nice crowd today. Let's check one thing here. All right. Yeah. Hey, so thanks for being here today. Lots of good stuff. We've got lots of good stuff on tap. I was thinking about kind of the last few calls, and it's one of the things I want to be super grateful and thankful for Kirsten Hammersberg, her notion a few weeks ago of kind of moving from knowing organizations and leadership to learning organizations and leadership. And that's something I've really taken to heart personally. How do I spend more time learning?
You know what? Why don't I sit? Can I sit over here and you do?
Somebody's trying to figure out.
No, it's fine. But can I just sit at the kitchen table with that behind me?
Hey, Steve Nielsen, you're on.
What?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there Steve's on. So yeah, just this idea of knowing organizations and leadership versus learning organizations and leadership. And I really appreciate that from Kirsten, but it's really been kind of a guiding force. And I sent to you guys a couple of really interesting studies that I saw. One, thanks to John Healy on dynamic open talent. That was a recent study from in the HR field. It really kind of talks about how to implement a lot of the tools and from that perspective. So it is a long study, so I'd really suggest you guys dive in and look at it, but it's definitely a meaty one. Oh, hey Steve, you're Steve Nielsen. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Steve Nielsen. Somebody's on, yeah. And then the other one is a platform solutions and adoption study from Oxford. And Greta, I hope Greta's on the call. I'm going to introduce her here in a little bit. So anyway, that's kind of the kickoff. We're going to dive back in and talk a little bit about, we sent out kind of some analysis from last week on what happened in the workshop. The workshop was amazing, so I really appreciate everybody leaning into that. I want to discuss that today. I want to get to Brian and Corinne and Arthur and talk about their study, and then jump in and talk with Chris and Jen and Greta for a few minutes. One of the things I was going through the notes from our last workshop last week, which was incredible. I don't know about you guys, but what an incredible experience, right? You're so used to that kind of sticky note thing happening in person, and to have that done remotely was really, really powerful. And I reflected on some of the, a while ago when I started one of my companies, one of my investors kind of told me, he said, hey, the key to entrepreneurship is trying to identify what wants to happen in culture. What's happening, what wants to happen, and then your job is just to allow that to happen.
Just need more water.
So that's kind of what, I think this is all about, right? What wants to happen in culture, and then how do we help it happen? So we're going to go to a breakout. And today I want to focus on, like how, as you guys break out, like, let's talk about how was the workshop last week? And as we look at the hypothesis and reflect on the input, what do you guys feel needs to happen in the industry to increase adoption? And just for a review, the hypothesis we laid out last week was, as allies who believe in the virtues and support the adoption of open talent and innovation models, we believe that we can make more meaningful progress together than apart. How might we become together, or how might we come together and organize the open talent marketplace, overcome the most critical challenges, and reduce friction that interferes with the adoption of this new paradigm for work? So just a kind of a background, let's jump to our breakouts and discuss that. Look forward to seeing you guys in a couple minutes.
Okay, we'll see you all in about 6 minutes. Here we go.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks. Hey, listen, let's if there's anything that came out of your little conversations, like jump in and throw it into the chat. Would love to get that kind of, like understand what everybody's feeling and thinking. And so great. All right. Well, thanks again for doing that. That's always one of the highlights from my week for sure. Just getting to know people and figuring out who's on the call and sharing some stuff. Hey, Chris Stanton, you're here. Look at that, man. Did you get another haircut?
No, I just brushed it today, John.
Sweet. All right, Chris from Harvard, what's happening and how are things going? Any reflections on kind of, last week and the way things are going, and what are you working on?
Unfortunately, I had a conflict last week, and I saw numerous people posting that it was an epic meeting, and I need to go back and look at the transcripts. As some of you know, John, Jen, Paik, and I have been tossing around a few ideas around formalizing some of the content from these meetings into a written piece. And we were lucky enough yesterday to catch up with Pranush from Microsoft around some of their
Awesome.
insights around the transition to work from home and remote work. And so I think we learned a lot. And I'm not actually sure if he's on the call, but we had a great interview there. And so I would say that we don't have any conclusions or firm conclusions yet, but we're in exploration mode. And I'm looking forward to being on this one because I think the momentum is getting there. And in fact, in our breakout, Mary was just talking about something that I thought was incredibly important. And so maybe I'll cold call her and the HBS tradition and turn the floor over there.
All right, Mary.
And hello everyone from sunny Cleveland. I couldn't sit outside anymore.
Nice.
For those of you who think you're all
so
that
rarely go
between
together.
Colorado and LA, this is the Cleveland life. It's very leisurely and sunny. Haven't you heard? Okay, Chris, you're putting me on the spot. I think I made 2 points. One, I was talking about personas. The other one was let's start with a future back approach. Which one do you want to put me on the spot to talk about?
I thought the future back approach was awesome.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and I bring this up because I've been working with a machine learning startup who's trying to figure out how to cross the chasm as well. I think if we could nail down exactly how an organization, what it looks like. So day in the life of before and after for operating with a gig mindset, operating a gig mindset model, what that looks like, and kind of having that on a piece of paper for people to react to. So they're in that frame of mind about what we're actually talking about at a tactical level versus, hey, the art of the possible is the gig economy and here are all these high value business cases for it. I want to be able to go to a client and say, listen, this is just a shot here, but I think that this is how you're going to run your organization in 5 or 10 years. Tell me what resonates, what doesn't resonate, what are the barriers to getting there very tactically. What we're finding is that gives a very, a lot of very tactical issues that will impact adoption emerges from that. And so I think it'd be really interesting for this group to lay out that manifesto, if you will, of, by persona, this is tactically how tasks are executed within your organization with a gig first mindset.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thanks, Mary, for adding that. Chris, thanks for prompting that. Really appreciate that. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks, guys. Hey, Jen, what's happened at the lab? Give us an update.
Yeah, aside from some of the stuff that, Chris and I are doing, lots of cool things regarding AI. You guys know that's the other half of my life. And AI in the enterprise has been spectacular. I think the last time I spoke to you guys with Rob May from inside.com, insideai.com, we did a little write-up. I posted it today. If you're LinkedIn with me, I'll actually share it in the chat shortly as well. But it's a quick read, about 3 pages, but lots of cool takeaways on how to get started if you're in the enterprise, making sure you're not getting in a crowded space, and experimentation is key, as with most things. So I know that as these worlds sort of merge, and AI is going to continue to be spot on for us, and I want to encourage you guys to tune in. We do these webinars once a month. The next one's on June 10th with Peter Skrummer, who's fairly renowned in the space as well. And again, we'll have some write-ups that go around, so please feel free to read it and share it and send feedback. Aside from that, the lab's doing great. We've got a rapidly, within the next few months, we'll have a nice paper on what transpired in terms of contests and contests that were out there in the first 90 days of COVID. And so we're doing some analysis now on that, and some of the findings are interesting on how people who've actually done this stuff at scale prior to COVID are actually more likely to be able to launch this quickly. We've looked at some cases with ventilators, and especially with Montreal General Hospital, and they've been really keen on baking their contest so that they actually required you to have in place certain experts join the team for ventilator design, but also have it prototype in a way that it can be manufactured at scale using Fab Labs, and the replacement parts are cheaper. So they're down to some finalists on this, but also with regulation. So they tied that all into a contest, and did a couple interviews with them, which was fascinating, and that's going to pump through and hopefully show some good results. But sort of how to get innovative in crisis time, again, particularly around contests. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys once we get the paper through, and maybe I'll even just do a presentation. Might be easier to digest. Aside from, there's always a slew of really interesting things going on academically. We do want to encourage you guys to try to read the dense papers, I guess. But in terms of it's like practitioner application, we did a survey with scientists. Kareem ran this survey with a bunch of our scholars. We had about 4,500 scientists that we surveyed right after COVID on productivity and remote work and what that's like. And, not unsurprising, our results were that, it's difficult, and it's particularly difficult for women. And what's kind of been understudied is sort of the childcare effect on this, right? So I'll also put that in the chat as well. You guys can read it. That's actually out on SSR, and it's been published. So while we didn't get to survey, managers and executives, there's parts of this that we surveyed scientists, and we got good response and got quick review. It's peer reviewed, obviously, and it's getting published. So encourage you to try to follow up with some of that, and it's good. The main thing is I think we're just cranking on both the open front and the AI front. So please continue to follow along with the different things that we're doing at the lab.
Right, Jen, thanks, man. Really appreciate that. Lots going on. It's interesting. Hey, so yesterday, I guess it was, I had an amazing conversation with Greta Corporal from Oxford, and she wrote an amazing paper back in 2017 called Platform Resourcing: How Fortune 500 Firms Are Adopting Online Freelancing Platforms. It was a paper that I wasn't aware of, but it really, really is amazing. And I sent that out in the email, and really would encourage you guys to read it. But also I wanted to introduce Greta. Greta just put the link on the chat, but Greta, want to welcome you to the group. And I know you're doing some cool research and some cool things. So would love for you to just talk a few minutes about what you're thinking and what you're doing, and how we as a group can support that and help you with the research.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure, likewise, to meet you yesterday. Very exciting. Dean Bosch, now Verticent, connected the two of us as we accidentally ended up in the same Zoom call the week before. I'm Greta Corporal. I'm a research fellow at Saïd Business School, University of Oxford. For the past 4 years, I've been studying the rise of what we call online labor platforms, what you call on-demand freelancing or talent platforms. And as a sociologist of technology work in organizations, I've been studying firm adoption of these platforms and their remote working models, as well as platforms themselves and how they think about the future of work and how that's being translated into their technology and AI. So that's kind of broadly my research agenda. I just got a $500,000 British Academy grant supporting me for the next 3 years to conduct full-time research on this topic. Yes, in terms of, like as an academic, my main focus is creating knowledge and getting that out there in the world. And I see you as a big partner there. And I also am a very practice-oriented scholar. I love to be connected with industry, have conversations, what's going on, what are the challenges, and next to producing academic outlets, to also have more industry-facing publications and stuff. So feel free to reach out. Yes, as John said, I did this study of Fortune 500 firms adopting platforms such as Upwork and TopTal, really the space of high-end professional freelancing. studying 24 firms and working on 2 papers there, like their motivations as well as, you know, the journeys that these platforms go through as they land within the organization and how that matters for how it's being used and how they set up the interface. Yeah, I also studied, you know, the development of algorithmic matching technologies, studied, you know, the growth. How do you grow a marketplace for remote work as a 2-sided market? So applying platform strategy insights and seeing how that works in the world of work. And I also have an in-depth study of how disputes are being handled in this space. When you think about really this being a sustained model of work, we should really think about when there is a labor dispute, how do we handle it? And maybe there's an opportunity for technology to do a good thing here and really facilitating very quick handling of labor disputes. So that's another area of research that I do.
That's
yes,
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Greta.
Joe.
That's really great. Really, I think some of the stuff you're doing is really, really awesome, really cutting edge. And it's really kind of, for me, listening to and talking to you yesterday, Mary, I think your point of view is start with the future and work back. And I think that's where we can really leverage in some of these kind of academic work to build that future model, right? To understand who the early adopters are and who's doing the most cutting edge work, and then figure out what the model could be so we can look at it future forward. So thanks, Greta. I really appreciate it. Welcome to the call, and reach out to anybody. Make sure you throw maybe your LinkedIn,
Will do. Will do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, and hey, Brian and Karen and Arthur, I know you guys were going to give us an update today on kind of the survey you did, which was, I so appreciate that. And any updates on that?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start, and Karine and Art just go ahead and fill in the blanks. We've had a number of different calls, and we were pleasantly surprised by the amount of survey information we got. It seemed like a lot of you collect a significant component of data around how we define diversity. The primary one that people seem to track in their platforms is about second chance workforce, which includes moms returning back to work as well as people who have prison records. So I thought that was an interesting insight. So we are still going to dive deeper. Our fundamental premise of our study that we want to do is ensuring equal opportunity and access to diverse groups. Our hypothesis is, and what we want to find out, is exactly how many people are taking advantage of the platform and open economy, which is really designed in such a way that it should theoretically democratize work. And we really wonder if that's indeed the case. The democratization includes things that are independent of a lot of traditionally hiring bias roles, which are also predicated around background and location. So we're first going to write a series of position pieces, and we encourage everyone to connect with us on LinkedIn to help share those as we go out. We're going to post articles about different elements of diversity and inclusion, and to start to build some market narrative around this particular topic. And then after we start to advance that thought leadership, we are also working on a positioning paper that we're going to collaborate on together, as well as the potential of case studies. So we're going to get connected and push those things out, and hopefully we'll have more information to go to. So we'll be connecting with different sorts of folks who responded to those surveys to see if we can get some more data moving forward. Karine and Art, anything I miss?
No, I think that's good. Another thought we had is whether, as the economy sort of recovers and companies look to platforms to fill positions, might they use it as an opportunity to push for more diversity? Mm-hmm. So at the university, certainly it's very much on people's minds. So it might be actually a business opportunity for the platforms here if we do this correctly.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Very cool. Well, thanks, Brian. Arthur, anything from you on this?
No, I think both Karen and Brian covered it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for taking the lead on that and pushing it forward. It's certainly a hugely important issue, and I think it's something that we all need to implement and do a better job of, and look forward to your guys' research and ways that we can actually implement it, both on the platform side and on the demand side. So thanks again. All right. So we sent out yesterday a link to something that Catherine worked on. She took the time to download all the notes, and what an amazing meeting last week. I was just blown away by the workshop and the way that it worked on the platform. Catherine, what was the name of the platform again? It was Mosaic or
Mural.
Mural, yeah. And so, you know, one of the things that was a little bit difficult for those of us that participated, there were so many stickies, and we, you know, we as a group did such an amazing job participating. It was super hard to organize. So thank you so much, Catherine, for getting that organized and sending that out. I wanted to, you know, Catherine, for you to take it over a little bit and discuss kind of what you saw some of the main insights were, and let's just have a discussion around that. And then I think you've got kind of an exercise for us to think about as well.
Great. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to add the link to the notes in the chat for everybody.
Great.
And let me know if you can't access the document, but I mean, just backing up a little bit, just since not everyone has been on every call. So we're working toward a design sprint that's going to be held July 13th to 15th. And John, jump in if I miss something, but it's going to be 4 hours a day, 3 days in a row, and we're really going to be working toward figuring out, you know, how this group comes together. It's really that hypothesis that we just discussed in our breakout sessions, but how can we as a team or as a group come together and overcome some of these barriers, and what would that look like? How would we structure? What would we want to accomplish? What would be the highest priorities for the audience groups? And so we did this mural last week, and a lot of people posted about it on LinkedIn. It was essentially just a whiteboarding exercise where we said, if you think about this hypothesis of how we come together as a group, what are some of the, you know, great things about coming together? What are some of the challenges that might occur from all of us coming together? So the great things were the roses, the challenges were the thorns, and then the buds were, what are some of the sort of future opportunities, and what would that look like? So getting in a little bit more to what Mary was talking about, like what might the future look like if we did come together in this way? So everyone went and worked kind of asynchronously on this mural or whiteboard. And then we captured all of that information in a Google Doc. So hopefully all of you guys can access Google Docs, and that's what I have posted in the chat. But let me bring it up here. 1 second. My apologies, I have little ones at home too. I just had someone run out for a bike ride, said they'd see me back in an hour. I'm just going to bring up the notes from last week's meeting. But I think what's important, I think Tom O'Malley said it really well. In order for everyone to feel like they're included in this process, not everyone can come to these meetings every week. So we'd like for people to feel like they can access these docs, work on them on their own time, feel free to contribute, like I said, either, you know, during these calls, verbally, in the chats, in the docs, but also feel free to work offline. Brandon, I actually can't bring the document up, unfortunately. It says that the host disabled attendee screen sharing. But I'll just pull it up here on my own side and tell you guys some of the highlights of what was said in the mural exercise. So in terms of what was awesome, it seemed like everybody was really excited that there was so much awareness of the opportunity that this industry has. You know, we are really uniquely positioned to change the way companies engage talent and the way talent goes to work. But there's a lot of work to be done, and it's great to have so many amazing minds on this call that, you know, want to put in the effort and roll up their sleeves and come together in this way. We also talked about how coming together was an integral part. So this group collaborating, very passionate, coming together from all different industries and both demand side, supply side, academia. Some of you are just plain passionate about this industry. So, you know, people are excited about the opportunity that, you know, we could all bring together. A lot of the ideas of things that we could work on as a group came out of sort of the roses section of the mural last week. So some of the themes began to emerge, things that the group could work on. like influencing industry terminology, asking, you know, actually just going out to the demand side and really trying to figure out like, what are the barriers by persona, by different size companies, you know, why aren't people adopting these models, and what are some of the reasons that they're not, and how can we overcome some of those barriers? A lot of folks mentioned the value that everyone will see from coming together as a group in a positive way. You know, a lot of people mentioned that we will do this faster. We'll be able to get, you know, people back to work faster. We'll be able to grow our own businesses faster on both sides. We'll have access to a larger group of talent, all stuff that no one on this call would be surprised by. But those were some of the common themes that came out of the roses. And I want everyone to know on the call that after we run through this quickly, it would be great if anyone wants to go through the document, look for your own feedback, add your feedback, continue working on this. Feel free to bucket the data differently. We're not averse to anyone coming in and thinking about it in a new way. I know Tom also in an email on a side had mentioned that, you know, we could also look at sort of a lot of these ideas coming from the group more in terms of, you know, breaking them out by infrastructure versus operating models. And I thought that was a nice way of looking at some of the action items that will come out from this group. So we'll start to bucket them in ways that make more sense so that we can create an actionable plan that folks can contribute to moving forward. Quickly, I'll go through the thorns, but some of the barriers, the things that folks thought were not so great about the statement were that the hypothesis really needs to be more concrete. And, you know, that's a really great point. And one of the main goals of bringing everyone together on these calls is so that we can really work together to try to tease out what the folks on the calls and what the industry wants to do next. And John talked about that at the start of the call today. You know, what do we want to be, and how do we want to come together? And so we would like for that to kind of organically grow out of the thoughts and the thinking from this group. And we will continue to iterate on our hypothesis between now and the design sprint, and then also during the design sprint. A couple other things just to raise, I think, that came out were that I think a lot of people see a lot of the challenges to the actual workers that are actually doing the work on the freelance platform. So probably a lot of us have thought about this just as we've all come into this new remote full-time way of working for some of us. I think we can all probably relate more now to what being a full-time freelancer might look like. And, you know, it was everything from isolation and impact on mental health to lack of community, fear of job security, fear of income stability, commoditization of people and talent, and potentially even low success rates for freelancers on platforms. And we see that happening more and more as the unemployment rates rise and there's a larger number of folks on these platforms. And then challenges to the demand side was obviously another theme. There's too many sponsors, too many buyers potentially in the company. Again, what are the personas that we're trying to reach within the companies and enterprises? And how would the clients understand and define how to engage talent marketplaces? So these are all areas of challenge, yet they're also, of course, as you all know, areas for opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. That's awesome. I think, you know, the buds, we have some buds too, but we could go on. There's so much information here. And so I'd really encourage everybody to jump in and do that. Let's jump to the exercise right now so we can get kind of some participation from everybody and get the dialogue going.
Okay, great. So to connect all of this together, so we're just taking it one step further. So if you think about this hypothesis one more time, as we come together, we organize the open talent marketplace and overcome our critical challenges and reduce the friction that interferes with the adoption of this new paradigm for work. What industry groups, communities or movements, products or services have each of you in your own journeys through work and life? what other types of groups and companies have you come across that might be useful for all of us to draw upon for inspiration? And it can be analogous inspiration. And so we'd love for everyone to think about that question and use the chat. If there's groups that you're a part of, or if there are tools you use, but what other sort of analogous types of things would you want us to look at as a group to draw inspiration from? And just feel free to think on your own, paste it in the chat, and when we're all kind of winding down, I think we'll spend some time and let folks explain their answers if they want to elaborate.
Yeah, that's great. As we do that, let's have some participation. You know, Paul, you did a really nice post last week of talking about the process last workshop, and thanks for getting that out there. I was inspired as you were. I've done a lot of those like you in person, and I never thought it was possible to do it digitally. So any thoughts here?
There's something I'm posting right now. There's a great podcast with Nihat, who is in charge of the freelance program at Microsoft. I'd recommend everybody taking a look, because he's in procurement, and it's a good inside view of how the machine is trying to grow a program from that perspective, from like procurement, who procures contingent talent. And I think there's some good language and stuff. And so I'm going to post that right now.
That's great. That's great. And thanks. And hey, John Healy, you sent me that article on dynamic open talent, which I thought was really, really great. It's very dense, so I'm just kind of part of the way through it. Any thoughts here on how we, take this and look at other case studies and other things, or things that you've seen?
I think the opportunity, and I think what we've just been asked to do by Catherine is a great starting point. A lot of research has been done in this area, and I think the sad part is the low rate of adoption compared to the amount of research that's gone into this. And I think we have to take some time to really think both on the head and the heart of why we're trying to get things to change and the implications of doing it. So, from the heart side of things, you have an emotional tie for a lot of people who have deployed centralized programs and been recognized for creating significant savings in their organization, or significant process improvements, or reducing risk. And now you're going to ask them to undo many of those parts to go into a more of a distributed environment. At the same time, in the head side of it, you have an economic model that's going to change. Everyone has been driving towards lower cost per unit, and this is going to be a value play that may ultimately have a higher cost per unit, but generate more value for organizations. And so there is a new mathematical model that's going to have to come forward for organizations. So I guess my encouragement in sharing that with you, John, is that there's a lot of research. Like I said to you, that one's very, very dense that's out there. I think what Greta shared is also fantastic information. And it just tells you how much people have been looking at it, and that this is a bigger problem for enterprises because they struggle to deal with experimenting and finding those spots where we can experiment and then tell the story where you have success or failure from the experiments is that really hard thing to get larger enterprises to be willing to expose themselves on.
The thing that I think John, as always, is articulate and expresses complex ideas simply, and I think it's fantastic. The thing that I think is a missed opportunity in a lot of the narrative is forgetting that organizations are a collection of discrete people with different goals, objectives, and emotional needs. And as someone who spent a number of years in procurement, I can tell you that the awareness around these platforms is certainly high. When I was at SAA, our buyer survey would show that Open Talent essentially had 84% awareness and or implementation, and with like 65% of the respondents to the surveys would say they've thought about or considering implementing or have in the next 2 years. But that interest hasn't changed in some time. Remember, John, the number has been the same for the last several years, so that there's awareness of it and there's interest, but the knowledge of how to have the pig go through the snake is the real challenge. And the thing that I think we really need to focus on to really grow the movement around open talent and adoption of open talent is the understanding of how we make the message accessible at the point of employment decision. And how do we make those things available to people, and so that the organization won't reject the foreign body. And that's been the secret sauce around any new movement, is to get it at the ground level. And I think that's the interesting opportunity around standardization and definitions and coming out with consistency, is the need for us as an industry to be uniform in our talking points, and independent of, and I think, John, you and I talked about this, is independent of our own commercial goals, we all share the same objective of rising the tide for all of us. And so part of the narrative that's going to make that successful is if we put our ideas and the concepts as common knowledge. So it sounds the same coming from me as it does from Paul, as it does from John, as it does from Steve. The core ideas around what makes open talent successful needs to be uniform for them to be accepted. And so we need to talk with the same language around the same value levers, obviously with their own nuances, but I think that's going to be the key towards these things being adopted wide.
Yeah,
I'm going to take a slightly contrarian view to that, which I sometimes enjoy. It's so I was talking to David Swift on the call. Runs global procurement for Novartis, and the numbers in general, and not specific to his companies. They have 100,000 employees. They have 30 to 50,000 non-employees. So it's not as though they're not using open talent or non-employees. They are just not using marketplaces. So
that's a fair statement. Yeah, that's a fair statement.
Using MSPs to do it. So I mean, I just want to ensure that we're not sitting on a high horse, that we have this insanely awesome solution that nobody else is using it. They are using it. They're just not using this engagement methodology.
Yeah.
So,
Balaji, this is David. I can confirm that we have 50,000 on top of the 100,000. And the idea that you build it and they will come is not true. It's all about the cultural change. And John knows this, because I partnered with John in Kelly in putting in together a talent platform. And we also have some freelance platforms that we've used or brought in. However, you can put all the plumbing in, and then if nobody uses it, you're still doing what you've always been doing. So it's how do you get the business to follow and change habits. It's all about change management and changing the culture. And Brian is spot on. People are in procurement. People are very aware of it. At least all the ones I know are very aware of it. And many of them have brought the tools into their companies, but they haven't always been successful in getting the business to say, okay, let's change the way we work and let's start to use it. And there are many reasons for that. And what I would love to see this group do is pick maybe 2 or 3 of the biggest ones and collectively come with ideas and solutions to try and remove those barriers, and then work your way down through the lesser ones. So, and I'm sure you can easily come with 2 or 3 that you all have that same pain point, and then help your procurement colleagues in your potential customers to remove those barriers and therefore grow your business, and everybody wins out of it. But very practical steps in what you can do. Because there are opportunities, but we have to have that change management working for us, and that will take time.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thanks, Balaji. Thanks, David. David, just to ask you another question. So what would you rank as the top 2 or 3?
I think we probably all know that corporate IT hates having to bring in new tools, because they want a simple life. And their job is to keep their life simple. So when you come with different platforms, then you're going to have to hook it up into the ERP or into your VMS or whatever. It's like a headache for them. So they don't really want to do it. So they'll find a million reasons not to do it, and they can kill the project before it gets going. That's one reason. So I know you're looking at potential standardization. I think that would be really, really useful, because it enables corporate IT to keep their easy life, because you're not asking them to plug into 10 different systems, but maybe one. Now, it might be 10 systems, but with one technology behind it. I think that's one. The HR function, as somebody said on the commentary, is very, very risk averse. They're very 20th century. They don't necessarily get this 21st century model. I've had to spend a lot of time with Novartis HR to convince them that they need to look at not just permanent talent, but also the rest of the talent, which is now 40 to 50% of the total. They don't see that as their responsibility. Now they're starting to change. I think that's a big cultural thing to get over as well. And I know we're not unique in that. Many companies face the same problem where HR only looks at the permanent talent. There are, to me, two things that come to mind straight away, but there are no doubt others. It's just inertia as well. People are used to doing it in one particular way. I think also some of the regulations in the industry don't help either. In the United Kingdom, they have IR35, and in different parts of the world, they have lots of compliance issues which hold things back. That's harder to influence. That's more of an industry body that needs to talk to governments, I think, to try and influence there. And maybe this could be something that you could look at as well, because some of the laws in countries are really not helping the spread of this.
Yeah, that's great, David. Thanks. Yeah, another thought that came to mind when you were talking, John. Thanks again for connecting with Tim. Tim, is his last name Prom? Is that how you pronounce it? Yes, Tim Prom runs Kelly OTG, and we had a really interesting discussion around adoption. I think the efforts that Tim's doing are really interesting, creating that kind of curation layer, right? The connective tissue between platforms and organizations to increase adoption. And Steve, I noticed in the new Noise 2, the contract that you got, there are a couple of organizations. Unfortunately, Diane's not here to talk. She had to leave, but then there's another one, I think Force7 or something like that you're seeing. Are you seeing this rise of curation layer to kind of build the connective tissue between making things tactically possible inside organizations and, where we are today that's more philosophical and direct to platform?
Yeah, definitely. Tech7 is the one that I think Diane's SocionWorks is part of. And the whole idea is, hey, we have access to pretty much any crowd you want. We'll provide this ability to take your problem and basically use whatever series of platforms or project managers and kind of curate on top of that, so you don't have to worry about engaging with them. I just talked to Sarah Tang at Freelancer, and I know their enterprise offering is a similar kind of thing where they just create teams that do all that for you, right? So, but I think I think what we're talking about is exactly right. We've got to find kind of this common interface, like I just put in the chat something about service level agreements in open in web-based software architecture, right? That didn't actually enable this kind of really distributed computing that we have now with software kind of distributed everywhere until we got standards on how that works. And I think what I heard in the HR discussion and some of that is it takes so much to kind of fit these in sometimes to our existing projects. We've got to find ways that interface is well understood, easy to exercise, and kind of plug and play in both digital systems and into our cultures and AI. So, and I love some of the discussion about that this is more than just this binary, right? This is a way to do this in all sorts of, I think, Paul, you said something about this isn't just an all or nothing. You don't just have people show up and never see them again. There are relationships that can be built here. There's persistence over time, and it's more of an ecosystem model than, and I think there's some good discussion about, using the word gig economy kind of invokes this one-time, one-off use. So lots of great discussion in the comments today. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Mike Morris, I know you're on. You mentioned a few weeks ago that the idea of the W3C as an organization that was really fundamental in the start of the internet, right? Are you still on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, standards and organization bodies have a role to play as new things are coming about, and the impact that the W3C had early on was huge. I think often they don't continue to be as impactful, but they are needed at the beginning. I think we do need, something like that in our space that touches on the main, the equivalent of what they had to solve, right? you know, down to, I mean, the way that they solved accessibility issues. Like we have our own version of that in our space. And I would love to see it come out of more of a group like this than the other options, where it's, you know, comes out of things like IR35 and other regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a
great input.
Hey, John, I have a question / provocation, if that's
Yeah, Ty. I was going to call on you next anyway.
Perfect
Perfect timing.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, this has been fantastic as usual, great discussion, and it's making me wonder about something, and I'm not sure how to articulate this. I'll do my best. We have this, you know, as big changes happen, right? There's the thing where human beings tend to underestimate the pace of change in the short term, or overestimate the pace of change in the short term and underestimate the pace of change in the long term. And, you know, I was just thinking about this term digital native. You know, as the world has moved on to the internet, there are people who grew up with it and therefore don't even really don't know life before the internet and digital tools. And it made me wonder if there are, you know, maybe what we need is some examples of what I would call open platform native companies. In other words, companies that were formed to be open from the beginning. And it made me wonder if anyone knows of any of those, because an accounting of businesses that are being started on open platforms and being run on open platforms from the beginning would be a very interesting list, at least, to keep, to see how they're doing. And a big, you know, and potentially a great source of examples to use of how to do it for companies that are trying to become better users of open platforms. And ultimately, the ultimate get would be one that just kicks everybody else's ass and makes it clear that it's obviously a better way to run a business. Anyway, that's just a thought. It's why I brought up this company Colony a little while back, and if it's interesting to folks, I'll put the white paper back in the chat. But that's their aspiration, is to build a platform that you can actually build enterprises on, based on open the open talent model.
Yeah, that's great, Ty. I mean, that definitely dovetails into the question I was going to ask you, because you're the master at changing culture, right? And understanding how to change culture. I mean, as we look at this problem, is it the case that we'll see organizations, or do you think we'll see organizations that can adopt these new tools, or is there going to have to be some kind of existential threat in the incumbent organizations, and you'll see kind of a whole new generation of companies that, like you said, are built digitally from the start, that have these kind of open talent platforms built into them? I mean, obviously, right, technology like Yahoo kind of went away, and Google replaced it, and Facebook, and, you know, all the examples that we have now digitally in other areas.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say both. It's both and, right? Like, I would encourage this group to continue thinking. Like, I hear people really thinking hard about how to get existing enterprises to adopt this new technology. That's the hardest way to do it. It's important work, but but it's gonna take a while, would be my prediction. Like, and don't lose faith, right? It's a stamina game, changing big existing enterprises. So, you know, it's a marathon. Stay at it. And then, you know, I think we should also be doing is looking for the seedlings, the startups that are doing it in a new way, and trying to figure out how to, like, pour, you know, to hasten their growth by hastening their fame. Like, that's another thing we can do, is just promote the fame of companies that are doing it in a different and perhaps better way, as an example, because the big enterprises are going to want, you know, like they always do, they want to see the examples of the things, and ultimately they won't change until they feel the heat, you know, of potential disruption. My 2 cents.
So, Ty, I just wonder if that means, should we be targeting a lot of these kind of startup incubators as having training courses on this stuff? And really, because what I've found is startups are so fast and there's so much in the muck that they don't have time to really learn something new unless it's kind of attached to the incubation and the rest of it, because I think it's a huge opportunity to, like you say, form from the ground up the next generation of companies where this is baked in.
I think that's an awesome thought, and maybe that's a potential, as we brainstorm other ways of, maybe that's something that we really think hard about is actually either starting an education program for existing incubators or actually helping start at incubators for those kinds of enterprises. Like, I think that would be an awesome, it's ambitious, but I think it'd be great.
But guys, I'm not sure this is a technology play. Personally, when I sell it, it's about talent first, and the technology is the enabler. Because if you go to companies trying to sell technology, they go, so what? It's actually, to me, you need to articulate the why. And the why is, it's getting access to the top talent. How do I get my unfair share of talent? How do I get the competitive advantage for my industry, my company? It's not about the technology. I don't give a about the technology. It's how do I get the talent? Yeah, there will be a technology element to it, but that's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. So I think if you go down that road trying to sell the technology, you mightn't be selling the right thing.
I don't think it was selling the technology. It was trying to get on the bottom, the ground floor of organizations that are starting to build, so that they bake in access to the talent they're going to need in putting their business together, such that they're always, and it's kind of perfect, right? Because startups are always, 5-person things that need to do the work of 25. And that's exactly where open talent shines. So it's a perfect match. It's just the startups I've seen don't seem to be willing to, they don't seem to understand the shift that's going on, the fact that they're going to need that in their talent, and the idea that they're built, if they're successful, they will be building a new organizational model. And if you're building something, you're always going to build based on what you knew. And so we're just going to propagate the traditional model.
Yeah. And when they get to a certain size, the first thing they do is hire a head of HR. And what does HR do? Is the 20th century model. That's all they know. So, you go back to the root cause.
Yeah. Totally. I think wow, what an amazing discussion, guys. Thanks so much. I look forward to it. I love the provocations and the things we've got to get done. And it feels like every week we're building a little bit more momentum on, getting things, solidified on some action plans. I think the one takeaway today is, we've got to get away from being really philosophical and down in the tactics. How do we make things happen day to day? And I think that's got to be the big push. And hopefully as we go towards this workshop, those are my real desires and hopes out of the workshop, is that we have some really solid tactical things we can accomplish, and everybody feels like they can lean into and agree upon, so we really accelerate this movement. And not only, Ty and Steve, I think it's great to create this kind of new educational modules for startups, because me as a startup guy, I've always tried to figure that out and want that. And David, I think, it's super important to think about what are those big issues that we have to overcome in the, what are the 2 or 3 that we have to focus on? And I think there's a lot of similarity there too, right? It's not just 2 different audiences with 2 different messages. It's actually creating the same kind of base layer knowledge, so we can create a cultural movement, whether it's with a startup organization or if it's inside a large incumbent organization. So man, it's such an honor and such a privilege to be a part of this group. And I love you guys, and I'm super grateful. So thanks again for a great week, and really conscious on time. Shoot me up, hit me up, or Catherine or Brandon, on any ideas you guys have, or any ways we can improve this. And we're really, really focused on, getting this workshop down. Those of you who want to be involved, let me know and let Catherine know. But what's important again is really how do we start taking action and really make this happen and go down the road of making this better for everybody. So thanks again. Have a great weekend. Talk soon.
See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.